All right, friends, I am so excited to be talking with a friend of mine who is also a fellow
Yes.
coach, Andee Martineau, who coaches parents, and she has written a phenomenal book. And I wanted to have her on to talk about her parenting program, her book. But the reason I also wanted to talk with Andee as well is because she's also been a homeschool mom
I
as
have
well.
been. Yeah, I
Yes.
love homeschooling. So good.
Yes. So, Andee, tell us a little bit about you and your family and like how you got to this point.
Yeah, great question. So I have six kids, ages right now 23 to 14. So we had six kids in 8 years. Boom, bada boom, bada bing. And it's so fun. And I started homeschooling when my oldest was in middle of second grade, and we homeschooled. He never stepped a foot after that into any type of traditional school. So we were solid, locked and loaded. That was 2018. And then ever since 2018, we've been in and out. Different kids need different things. But the way I got to where I am now with the parenting stuff, and homeschooling was part of that, to be honest.
Right.
Like when you're homeschooling your kids, I'm sure all of your people will be well aware of this. But you just can't get away from the kids. Like you're just there. You get to confront
Right.
all the stuff that they bring up, all the triggers. Like there's no relief. So for me at least, I had to confront, okay, this is something happening inside of me. I better work on this. I want something different. And yeah, the first decade of my parenting till my son was 8 or 10. So 8 to 10 years of my parenting, it just was a really big struggle. I'm type A. I like things done a certain way. I'm very driven. I got through my I graduated with a nursing degree, and I somehow finagled to get through in 3.5 years because I'm just all about speed and efficiency, and kids
Right.
don't always cooperate with our plans. I don't know about you, but I
Yeah,
had a
no,
lot
my
of
seven are
control
perfect.
issues. What? You see your
My
children?
seven kids are just
Oh
perfect.
yeah,
They just,
perfect. Yeah. It was all me. It was like my control
yeah.
or need or attempt to control them really backfired. So when they were still young, I realized I had to look inward, and it wasn't them. I tried for a few years fixing them. It's time to
Right.
fix them. But it didn't work. And I just felt more frustrated, more messes, everything piled up. So eventually I started, and I remember having this moment, like, I'm not going to go there's got to be a better way. I'm not going to go the traditional way anymore. And that led me ultimately to what now I call connect method parenting, which is this developmental, like it's based in developmental psychology, attachment theory, way of interfacing with our kids, way of parenting, way of really showing up for life. That's so much better, but it's not necessarily what we always think of initially with parenting. Although as soon as I tell anybody, it resonates. I've never had anybody that's like, that's a terrible idea.
Yeah.
They might be skeptical that it would work, but they're like, if that would work, I
To
would want
me,
that.
like the connect method parenting, and anybody who preaches connect first, to me, is a very long game mentality.
Yes,
So they are done looking for the quick fixes. the
exactly.
the timeouts, the reward systems, the sticker charts, like all those things. It's like, okay, I'm going to lose my mind, especially where you're homeschooling and you're already with them day in,
Yes.
day out. And it's like, we got to stay on top of school and we got to do all of this. And it's like, I'm going to lose my mind. When you have this long-term like game plan,
Yeah.
it's just then it works and you don't have to, like, you just get to manage it and have it fun. Does that make sense? Like when you hit your weight loss goal and then like you just get to live
Yes.
life normally.
Yes, exactly. But sometimes it's in the moment we keep doing the short-term stuff. So like you have to
Yes.
hit that ultimatum in your, whatever that is for you, or maybe ultimatum is the wrong word, but that tipping point where you realize I'm doing the same thing over and over again. And yeah, I get temporary fixes. They listen to me when I come up with the right thing to give them or to take away from them.
Right.
And it's not there. So
Yeah. Well, right. It's the definition of insanity, of doing the same thing over
yes,
and hoping for a different result. Right. So like, I'm
exactly.
just going to come down harder. I'm going to force more. And I see, and I wonder if you see this too with the people you coach, is I see the extremes usually.
Yeah.
So either I'm going to force, control, do everything I can to make you fit into this mold, or I'm so worried about forcing and controlling, I give you no track to run on. And so you're
Mhm.
kind of out of control. And now I'm either yelling at you because you're not fitting in my mold, or I'm yelling at you because you're out of control because I've never said, like, this is too far.
Mhm.
Do
Yeah,
you
the
see that a
swing.
lot too?
Yeah, 100%. And I remember when I was first actually doing the reading and the research around parenting, I wanted to know, because that was the extremes. It was authoritative, really hard,
Yes.
passive, let everything go, like just try to keep the peace. And the research shows, it was so good for my brain. I love the research and the science shows that neither extreme is, which makes sense, but like I love the research, that neither extreme really gets us what we want.
Right. And I've even studied too where they actually will create the same thing.
Yeah, they're just two sides of the same coin.
Right.
They're the same thing.
At the end of
Yeah.
the day, it doesn't create a good relationship with your children, right?
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. So totally the swing. And I realized there's a middle way. Like
Hmm.
that's what I want, is the middle way. The way that's, because you need limits
Hmm.
and you need compassion. So you need both. But I think there's few examples in mainstream society where we're seeing that shown or demonstrated or taught or passed down.
Right.
And it's not a problem. Like everyone's doing the best they can. I firmly believe that. Like there's no shame. There's different reasons why different, types of parenting styles have been passed down. But I think we're at a place now where we can start to question the way it was and honor them and say, oh, what if I can have both? And that's really where the confusion comes in. I
Yeah.
know with homeschooling, it was the same way too. It was the debate between, I need to have a schedule and order and structure, and we've got to get through the list because I need to make sure my kids are learning. But I also don't want to destroy the relationship. So how do I also have fun and play and maybe let things go and go with the flow,
Yeah.
and not realizing, oh, you can do, I could do both. I knew theoretically I could for a long time figure out how to actually marry the two together in a way that
Yeah.
would work. Yeah.
So Andy wrote a book that's awesome. And we have a darling friend whose mom is a saint. If do you know Mary? I feel like Candace talks about Mary Ashworth as if she is like the golden goose of
Yes.
all mothers.
Yes. Yes.
And so
Yes.
Mary is like this most amazing woman, and she's spoken at like our homeschool co-ops, and she's this amazing. So when she read Andy's parenting book as well, she was like, done. Throw the rest away. Just like get all of
Oh,
them. So I loved it. Whenever Mary recommends something, I was like, all right, I'm done. Say no more. So I read this book and I really loved it. And so I wanted to have Andee on to kind of talk about, it's called Connect Method Parenting, and it's Andee
mhm,
Martineau. And people can check it out probably at Amazon, on your
right.
website, just
Audible. Yeah.
Audible, all the places, right?
All the
So
places.
talk to me about, how did you get to the point where you were like, wow, this is the problem that needs to be solved, is this connection component?
Yeah. It started just with inside my own home.
Uh-huh.
Realizing my relationships were not where they wanted to be, and my nervous system was constantly in fight or flight, and just thinking there's got to be another way, and looking to all the examples I could of people who I felt like had a lot of impact and influence, not even in parenting, but just in the world. Gandhi, Buddha, Jesus, looking at all of these people, Mother Teresa, I could name more,
Yeah.
and trying to pick apart, what do they have I'm missing, but it really started with me just recognizing, at least I had enough intuition or it's inspiration or however you want it, to realize, okay, it's the relationship that's a problem. And
Hmm.
I want to just decide to focus on that instead of the behavior or instead of the checklist. And it was really a leap of faith too, because it felt a little scary.
Right.
It felt as if I was going into this realm without tools. Like, I don't know how this
Right.
is going to work. I'm not really sure. But that's kind of what started. It was just me completely missing the mark, crying myself to sleep, feeling like nothing I was doing was working. I tried the family store and
I actually
like
remember your family economy.
yeah, all the things. And they would work to a degree, and what's interesting is a lot of those tools or techniques aren't inherently bad or it's not that they don't even work. It's like your motivation for doing them. So if your motivation for doing a family economy or a store or a trip to Target to buy a treat is to control, not even that we use that word, but just to try to fix something that we think is broken versus a celebration. Like we could do the same thing, is my point,
right,
with a different motivation, and it could work. So that was really interesting too, to start to untangle all of that and realize these things that I had maybe put in a bucket of not good, can't use those. They can actually be reintroduced once you get that core relationship healed and understand your motivation, why you're doing the things you're doing.
So so how then does one go about healing that core relationship with their child?
This is so good. This is like the crux of it all. Like, let's solve all of the problems right now. A lot of it comes to getting to a place where and this is one of my favorite things to say, my kids can recite it, but that everyone is really doing the best they can. And in that moment. So when we believe that everyone's doing the best they can, it takes away the they could do better. They should do better.
Yes.
I don't understand why they told me last night they would go to bed when I asked them to, or they wouldn't hit their sister. And if you can strip away that I should say will start to fall away, that mindset, when you are able to look at your child and say, okay, I'm going to go with this belief that they're doing the best they can. So what's getting in the way of them getting to a 10? Like today they're at a 2 or something, -10. It feels like they're just on a rampage. And so as a mom or a dad, but especially as an adult in the relationship, when we can come with compassion, with understanding, with patience, with believing that they're doing their best, we are able to initiate, I believe, and this is what I have seen with the moms I've coached and in my own relationships with my own kids, a healing, because all of a sudden their nervous systems can rest. So, because I'm not in fight or flight right now. Anytime I'm thinking the kids should be doing something different, like, why can't they just listen? I'm judging, and that's a nervous system response. And then their nervous systems are going to respond to defend themselves. And so now we have two nervous systems banging heads against each other, and we're not really getting anywhere. And it's definitely not helpful for that relationship, healing that relationship. But if they can feel my acceptance and my love, and I might have to set a limit. I like to use the word limit instead of consequences. I might have to set a limit, but I'm coming from a place of truly accepting them for where they are in that moment, instead of judging that they should be somewhere different. That's, I think, a really good first step. And it's a big ask, and there's probably a lot of questions like, how do I do that? Or is that dangerous? Maybe I'm letting them off the hook, but truly you're not letting them off the hook. It's not dangerous. It actually will make so much.
Well, this is when I love putting the perspective on myself.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
So
totally.
like something as simple as like, I'm in charge of our family's grocery shopping. And so let's say I told my husband I was going to go. I told my children I was going to go. I have money to go. I have a car to go. I just didn't feel like it. I fell asleep. I had other things pop up. And how do I want my husband and or my children to respond to me? And I think like nobody wants their spouse to come home and be like, oh my gosh, what do you do all day? You're literally in your sweat. Like, get up, get your going and getting after me. Or my kids saying, you are the worst mom ever. You told us you would go. Why can't you go? And thinking if my husband came home and said, no big deal, we have food. Like when like we live in the US, right? And most of us have plenty of food in our pantries and fridges. So even if I don't go grocery shopping, we can figure something out, right?
Yeah.
And so like having that compassion of like, oh, well, we just won't have this, but we can eat something else instead. Like, could you go tomorrow, mom? Could we help you? Like, how can we make that happen? And how much more I'm like, thank you for being understanding. Yes, I was having a total off day. And so when I put myself in that position, it helps me to start having more compassion to my children. Even like they ask me to do stuff all the time and I say yes, and I totally forget. And it's not a hate crime. It's not intentional to be mean to them. And so giving them the same grace that I would like to be treated with.
So good. Yeah. And on your example, which I've used a similar one, think of if not just you gave examples of why didn't you go do this? Why didn't you go to the store? But then think if you put okay, because you didn't go to the store.
Yeah.
You don't get any dinner, or you don't, you know what I mean? Like, then it's so fascinating. And it's very illuminating when we realize from our perspective how that would impact us. So good. Yes.
Yeah. So let's dive in and talk about consequences. Because it's an interesting term, because you said I don't like to use the word consequences. So like, I'd love to hear your take with that.
Yeah. I mean, the biggest reason, I don't actually have a problem with the word or anything. Okay. It's just that it's been so used, and for so many people, it means a certain thing that I think sometimes it's helpful to just insert another word that doesn't have all the connotation that we've been raised thinking a consequence. Like I got consequences and it meant this and I felt this way. Okay. And so it's just a hack that I personally started swapping out so that I could approach it differently. And to me, it's more neutral. So I love to think about it as there's this game of life we're playing, not that unlike a sports game, like say it was a soccer game or something. And there's rules to the game that you have to play to be able to interact with the other players and to have things go smoothly. But if a 5-year-old touches a soccer ball, they're not going to berate them, or there is a consequence, right? There is a result of that choice, that the other team gets the ball, and there's all of that kind of stuff. But I love just using this sports analogy of, if you were coaching 5-year-olds, how would you treat them if they broke a rule? How would you help them understand it? So this idea of we'll just set this limit and let them know this is the boundaries, and so that's the main reason I use it. But I do love to explore the idea of consequences, because you could use the word punishment if you want to, because it is the punitive side, but for most people, consequences tend to have a punitive skew, at least historically speaking, even if they've renegotiated that right. Is that a consequence done in a punitive way, or in a fix-it way, or this is a problem and I've got to do this to teach them a lesson or not let them get away with something. It does, like you said, sometimes work in the short term. So you can get, and there's a whole scientific reason why different ways we use it. It may be separation, where, if you don't obey, you have to go to your room, and that might really alert our child's nervous system to feel unsafe, that we're not going to be close to them, or if I have done this where I want to leave a store or leave my parents' house, and when my kids were little, I would say, okay, well, I'm just going to leave. Right. And as soon as we leave the room, they're like, they're so alarmed. And, Gordon Neufeld, this is one of my favorite developmental psychologists, talks about how this really, it works because we're triggering their nervous system and making them feel so afraid and not safe. And that's not what we intend to do. Right. But it is interesting to realize that's what's happening when we do, and in a way that's a consequence, right? You don't come, I'm leaving. And in that way, when we do it in a huffy puffy way. So consequences, I like to say, are there, or limits are there for safety. So we definitely want to go in and insert ourselves if our kids are hitting, or even if they're berating each other, with words, or if they're going to run into the street, right? We want to get into that situation and make sure everyone's safe. But what consequences in the traditional sense don't do is they don't really turn on the intrinsic motivation. They don't increase our impact or influence over them. They don't build our relationships. They don't increase our bond. So there's so much fallout of them when we set them in a way that we're trying to control or change or fix, that I just like to have the distinction. And as soon as people start, and it goes back to your story you were talking about, like, didn't go to the grocery store. If you felt like people were coming in, judging, shaming, giving you a consequence, you might decide to go the next day because you don't want to hear all of that again, or because you feel bad about yourself. But that's not why we want someone to do something in the long run, right? We want them to do it because they want to do it, and they want to be responsible or they want to contribute, and we want them to feel good about themselves. So it's just a little distinction I make. Does that make sense? How I
Yeah,
pulled
no,
apart?
it does, because, and it's interesting because the word consequence doesn't have a negative meaning to me. And so it's interesting, like, because I'm sure for other people, it is a hot word where it's like a consequence is like my way or the highway. And to me, it's like there's a positive or a
Yeah.
negative consequence to all of our actions. And so I love hearing just your different thoughts with that, because like I love I don't like the word discipline,
Yeah.
because to me that's like come down with a heavy hand, because if you break it down, to discipline literally means to teach.
Mm-hmm.
So how am I teaching them like what it is I'm trying to teach them? Am I doing it from this place of connection where I love them,
Yeah.
or am I teaching them because I'm embarrassed of them?
Right.
We can't be that homeschool family. We can't,
Right.
like, you know what I mean? Like, I know you already have there are people with insecurities and fears, like we're going to be socially awkward, we're going to be all these things, and we can't go out and do this. So I'm teaching you from this fear place, or I'm
Yeah.
teaching you because I love you,
Mm-hmm.
and like we can figure this all out.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's a big difference. The motivation is everything. And you're absolutely right. Like the consequence, the word itself, it doesn't necessarily have that inherent punitive meaning, but just so many people have a history with like, I'm going to give you a consequence if you don't,
Yes, but it all
and
depends on the way you use it. But I think that could be like with all our words that we say with
all
our
of them.
kids, right?
Yeah. What I found is very few people have used the word limit or had the word limit used with them.
Yeah.
So it's just a totally neutral word. So that is the
Yeah.
main reason. So yeah, but it's really, the motivation you were talking about is so powerful, because anytime we're coming from a place of most negative emotions, I would say it's not going to necessarily create this beautiful result we want if we're afraid, if we're trying to validate ourselves through the way our kids look, or the way they can recite their math facts, or the way their handwriting is, or whatever the case may be. It's just good to look at that and dive into that. I always ask my moms, why would you be embarrassed? Why would that be so upsetting for you? And we all have a form of that, but understanding our reason can clean it up. The awareness is that first step to getting it all cleaned up. So
yeah, no, that's so good. So talk to me a little bit about motivation, because I think that's what a lot of parents want, is that carrot. Like, how do I motivate them to get school done? How do I motivate them to get up and get their chores done? So like, how do you teach that with your connecting way?
Yeah. And there's two different, there's the kids, there's the mom's motivation of why she does certain things. So there's that whole element. Maybe we can come back to that. But the motivation to get our kids moving, to me, a lot of it goes back to how we're showing. Well, it all goes back to the moms, right? Like, how are we showing up, and why do I need them to get their chores done before a certain time? And what is that about? Because our energy, it's like seasoning or like bad breath or odor, it's bad or good. Like, do I have good breath or bad breath that our kids can sniff out if we're using them to validate ourselves? So cleaning that up for the mom is, I think, one of the most important things we can do to help our kids get motivated, because it's actually not about our kids. It's
right,
really
because
not.
some days it's not, and some days it is, which means it never is. It's always about us.
It's always about why the mom, and the energy we are, and the emotions we're having when we're trying to get them up.
Yes. Well, I think you've probably heard this too with clients of, I didn't yell, I kept it really cool.
Oh yeah, totally.
But it's like the tension, and like if you came on this call and you were super tense, I would feel it. Right. So you could put a smile on your face, and you could be like, Meg, like even your words would be short, and the way you would talk to me. So like our kids can feel that. We feel that with other people, like, ooh, what's up with that person? And so like, do you have moms who then struggle, like, so I have to be perfect, so I have to always like be happy and go lucky? Like, what do you say with the clients that come to you with that?
A lot come in with that. There's a lot of right, wrong, good, bad, all or nothing thinking for a lot of people that start, just because that's what we're kind of, for a lot of people, that's what we are taught in society, so they've brought that in with them. And really, there's so many ways to come at it to help us start to break that open and start to not have it like the need for perfection, when we can understand that, like, I mean, I help them really see there's really no such thing anyway. So, and there's no way your kids are, you're going to be able to, it goes back to control kind of. A lot of times we're trying to be perfect so that other people will think of us a certain way or act a certain way. And so breaking that apart is powerful. And it's one of the best things we can do to ourselves, is to stop thinking that need to be perfect. And I think perfectionism, which I think is a sister to people pleasing, because it's like, I need people, it's a nervous system reaction again. So when we can just link it to the nervous system, for me, it's, oh, this is just a coping mechanism that I've created to get validation somehow. Let me just look at that. And it's not personal. I think the reason we think we need to be perfect is because we're afraid of what we'll feel if we're not, or the judgment.
Right.
So when we can self-validate or have, a strong sense of self, and I call it a parenting self-concept that's really, really rooted in just this solid goodness and concept and confidence in ourselves, then
yes,
and I can withstand the judgment that is inevitable anyway, but now I just can withstand it instead of falling apart.
Yes. What I love too of teaching parents to just honor the way they feel.
100%.
Right. Because like, and I don't know if I've used this example before on the podcast, but like I was in charge of my first time hosting Thanksgiving. And I remember we were talking about this as a family, like, hey, here's kind of the plan. And I said, I might feel a little anxious. And my husband laughed, like, might. And I was like, no, you're absolutely right. I'm totally going to feel anxious because I'm having all these guests come over to my house. And when I just met my children with that, like, I feel a little bit anxious because we have a lot of company coming over. Everybody was so understanding to me. So like, they were like, yeah, mom feels a little bit anxious and that's okay. And then it also gives them the space. Like sometimes I feel a little bit anxious or I feel a little bit scared, and that's also okay.
Yeah, it's so good. One of my favorite distinctions with that, and I love the labeling it, just declaring it, labeling it, owning it, no shame.
Yeah.
And I have two thoughts. Okay, which way do I want to? Well, I was watching I've never watched it before, but I think it's the Met Gala or something. Okay. Have you ever seen that? They're walking on the red carpet. I was with my 20-year-old daughter out of town, and she was adamant, and she's like, we have to watch this. It's going to be so fun. I love it. And they were wearing the most interesting outfits, all these celebrities. And I remember looking at them and thinking, there's so much buzz right now in media about what people are wearing and some people are loving their outfits and some people are trashing them and thinking how could they wear that? That's the ugliest thing. Or how dare she? One of the Kardashians was wearing a dress from Marilyn Monroe and had dyed her hair blonde. And I'm sure some people loved it. And other people I saw later were thinking maybe she trashed the dress and what image is she talking, telling women. And I remember having this moment where I thought they are able to withstand all of that external positive and negative feedback and this is my assumption, and obviously not make it mean as much about them that maybe a normal person would. They're like, this is what I'm feeling. I'm sure they're feeling anxious. I'm sure they know, all of the things that are going to come out of them showing up on live TV with all these different things. But my thought, I don't know if it's true or not, was, wow, that's one of the qualities of being successful or highly visible is to be able to do what you're saying is at different levels of like, I'm feeling maybe anxious right now, and I'm going to go work on this red carpet. I'm going to read people's reviews of me, and it might, there's going to be a lot of emotions that come up, but they keep going anyway. And so just like your Thanksgiving dinner, at whatever level we are, whatever our thing is, to be able to say, I'm going to feel all of the emotions. I'm going to feel, part of me is going to be so thrilled everybody's here at Thanksgiving. And part of me is going to be so panicky. Maybe the bathroom forgot to get cleaned or something, and all of it in between. And that's actually what it is like to be a human. And it's not a bad thing to just acknowledge it. And the other thing that's really been powerful for me is my 20-year-old daughter, again, loves French. And so we were studying how they talk about emotions. And when you translate it, it's I am, or I have frustration, or I have anxiety. And it's it's nuanced, but very powerful. I've studied a couple other of the romantic languages, and it's similar. It's very powerful to make a distinction between, like, I have what you were saying, like I have, was it anxious or whatever? I have a little bit of anxiousness inside of my body right now, but it's not me. Like, it's coming through because of the things that are happening, but it's different than, I am anxious, which I say that all the time still, but like that almost feels, there's more ownership to that.
Yeah,
or
what
more
separates it from like me as a person, as a daughter of God.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah.
I'm just whole and complete, but I feel anxious.
Yeah, I have this emotion coming through.
Yeah.
Of course I do, because I'm hosting Thanksgiving for the first time. Or of course I'm nervous to have my kids homeschooled, because I don't know what this is going to be like, and it might not turn out, or I have fears that it's, they're going to be behind. I was just talking to one of my moms who was doing it, and she's like, I don't know if this is going to work. And I said, that's normal. Like, don't interpret that as a reason that everything's wrong. And I think that's sometimes what we do. So anyway, I just love that. And when we were doing this with my 20-year-old and we were talking about it, she told me, I wish I had known that when I was 5, like it would have just been so helpful. And I think it's such a mature place or way rather to speak about emotions. It's much more mature. I think if I think about how emotions truly are, like that's a much more accurate way to speak about it than we speak about it in English. Most of the time.
That's beautiful. Well, I know, so hey, my husband is a linguist, right? And does all these languages. And so
I love
all
it.
of those things, he loves
so
those.
Good. Yeah.
What I think is interesting too, as like with the connect method parenting and connecting and all of those types of things. So like I too also was a young mother who didn't know what she was doing, and a lot of little kids all at once, and all these things. And as I have put my parenting onto this different trajectory, it has healed hearts.
Right.
Like, and it's funny now because my kids would even say things like, because I always do, I'm big, I don't know if you know that, but like I always do my big no yelling course, and no yell November, right? And so like that's a big thing I love to push. And one of my kids were like, I don't remember, like, did you ever yell at us? Like, I don't even remember that. And I was like, I totally did, friends. I totally like, but I'm so glad. Like, I think like if we put it into like the whole perspective with God and everything like that, like he gives us these little children who are so forgiving and who are willing, like as we are willing to make this change and as we are willing to improve. I have seen, not only with my own children, but other people, clients and their children, that they are totally willing to forgive mom, to forgive dad. Like, yeah, you were trying your best. And now they can like start working in this cohesive unit and figuring things out moving forward.
Yeah. It's so true. As we heal ourselves, they heal, and it's safe. And I love all of that. And my kids are kind of the same way. They can't remember when I used to yell, but I'm like, there was a lot of yelling, a lot of desperate parenting back in the day. Right. And really coming from a place of trying to feel safe and validate, in hindsight, I see this, right? Validate my own worth through the way they were turning out. So, and I think that's when part of the healing you're talking about, I think comes when we start to shed that need to have our kids be evidence that it's working, or their behavior as evidence that it's working or not, or their big emotions as evidence. Like that's so, when we separate it, we get to have so much freedom when we stop thinking, oh, I have to fix the kids. Because what I found is if we stop thinking we have to fix the kids, then the fixing all of a sudden just takes care of itself, right? It's just like all the things I thought needed to be fixed aren't needing to be fixed anymore. It's just, our job is not to fix them. It's just to love and accept them for where they're at.
What's interesting too, is I've come to a place where I truly believe I'm a really good mom. Like no matter what, I'm awesome. And it's interesting because I did a podcast episode once because I had people who had judged my kids in a speech and debate tournament, or who were starting to see my teens. And I was like, oh, just so you know, they're human. They might tell an off-color joke. Absolutely. They may be wearing clothes that you may disagree with, but I still decided I'm a really awesome mom, and remembering that parenting is not a social project.
I love that. Parenting is not a social project. That is so powerful. And I think what you probably are also doing, I'm assuming you're like, I'm an awesome mom and my kids are awesome kids.
Yeah.
Even if they
Oh,
tell
I
an
know the
off-color
cool one.
joke, even if they, right, you know, even
Right?
if
Like
they're,
they still do all the normal kid things.
and I love and believe in their essence, their goodness, you know, and
Well,
I
yeah,
see that.
and I know it's not a problem,
Exactly.
right? Like
Exactly.
I don't know any parent who's ever had a like your best child ever, quote unquote best child. Like I know like so many good kids who've lied.
100%.
And right, and I like they're trying out different things like is this okay? Like and I don't even have to diagnose it like, oh, if I would have been more open, they wouldn't have lied to me and blah blah blah. Well, the fact is they did. And now
Mhm.
what do I want to do with that information? Well, I'm some awesome mom. So I'm like, hey, no worries. They're like, you may not like be able to do some of these things because we need to work on some skills, but like, fantastic. Thanks for opening
Yeah.
up to me and letting me know.
Right. And I see the line as it's just I go back. I love the nervous system. The more I study
Yeah,
it,
yeah,
the more
yeah. I know. I
I'm
was like, I feel like I need to pick your brain just on
oh,
that.
it's so good. But it's I go to, oh, they're lying. Of course they are. They're just, what's that telling me about their nervous system? Oh, they just don't feel safe to be completely transparent and seen. You don't need to blame yourself as a parent, because I've had parents do that when I've talked about that. They go, oh, I must have done something to make them lie. I'm like, no, not, we just want to like, let's separate those two things. We can always be improving, but
Hmm.
they're just the realization is there's just this is just information. I love saying behavior is information. And then I go,
Hmm.
behavior is just information about the state of their nervous system. So all of us will lie if we feel, if especially with a kid, if they feel they need to be connected to a parent or to an adult to
Hmm.
take care of them. And if they are afraid, and that if I tell the truth, it's going to jeopardize my relationship with this parent or this adult figure, maybe a teacher, they might choose to lie because instinctually they know I need to keep that bond alive for survival. So when we can see it like that, it just melts all the judgment away, and you realize, oh, that's what's happening. Okay, I'm an awesome mom and I can problem solve this. And they're amazing
Yes.
too. They're just in a triggered state. I do really stupid things when I'm in a triggered state, you know, as a mom,
Right.
as a 40-year-old woman. Like if I'm triggered, I will, you know, and I'll in hindsight say, wow, what is that about? And I'm like, oh, I was just trying to protect myself. I felt unsafe. So I
Yeah.
love thinking safety is the solution.
Oh, that's
Safety
great.
is the solution. Yeah.
Okay, I
And
feel like I could talk with you forever, but I know
yeah, you're
eventually
like,
we have to go back to our families. But I think I want
yes.
to end with what is your favorite way then? Because like the nervous system is something you've brought up quite a bit. What is your
Yeah.
favorite way to not only have mom's nervous system in check, but then like once I'm in check, how do I help my child with their nervous system?
In the context of maybe something that's
Let's
gone
say
wrong, do you think?
like let's say we'll use my 5-year-old as an example.
Okay.
Like let's
Yeah.
say he's a like he feels emotions intensely and he can
Yeah.
escalate from like a 1 to a 10 pretty darn quick, right?
Right.
So like for me I'm like that's not a problem, I can hold him and I can love him, but like do you do something intentional with helping his nervous system because it's obviously he's overstimulated.
Yeah. I mean, in the moment, in a situation like that, I think us holding no judgment,
Hmm.
completely, and when we realize what's happening in that moment too, is that if we allow him to feel the emotions, go from mad to sad or surrendering, his brain grows up. It's
Mm,
the best thing ever. They've done scans where they show when someone's fully able to, because they feel safe, because especially with a child, the parent is there to help co-regulate with them, but they don't feel the energy of stop crying, I can't handle this anymore. When we can, as a parent,
yeah.
hold that space, and I love going back to, this is so good, I'm going to give him a chance. Because sometimes we don't have the time to do it. We need to go
Yeah.
to something or another kid needs us. But if we have the time to just sit with them, or even if we don't sit with them, to emotionally sit with them and be present with them, to let them take that journey, that emotional journey. And I can reassure myself, this is the emotions are the engine to his maturation. So let these emotions ride the wave, and his brain will grow up. And that's what they've shown in the scans, right? It's a change, a physiological change in the brain. It allows me to just be okay with what's happening. And I don't need to calm him down on my timeline, because my timeline might be short circuiting what he needs. And I've had experiences where it's 20, 30, 40 minutes, then their bodies will release by sometimes crying or sweating or shaking. And I think it's over. And then the next day they need some more release. But if I can just let go of calm down, instead of it's safety, instead of a calm down corner. And there's been schools in Canada where instead of, they used to have calm down corners or calm down rooms. And now they have, I think they called them like free expression rooms or something. And it was a space where they explained to the kids, if you're feeling really emotional or frustrated or upset, you can go into this room and you can yell and punch and hit and scream. And when you're ready, you can come out, but there was no judgment around it. I think that's the best thing we can do to help our kids really purge the emotions so that they actually calm down, and it's not, it's not a temporary or
yeah.
short
So
circuit.
maybe this, I hope this isn't a weird question, but like, to me, it's thinking of strength training. If I were lifting weights, it's physically going to be hard, but it's going to build a muscle, right?
Exactly.
So then allowing my child to have their meltdown and just holding the space, is it the same concept then where they are building a brain muscle of being able to feel their emotions?
Exactly. So when the brain and nervous system, we'll use the word again because I'm going to use it as many times as I can on the podcast. But
get a prize
really,
every time.
I know. Oh, I get a prize after 100 times. But really what the signal it's saying to our nervous systems is, I can handle this disappointment, this big emotion coming out, and I'm safe. And so, it's this awareness, it is a muscle or a new neural pathway inside their brain that's helping their ability to hold negative emotions, that capacity to increase. And so in a sense, it is akin to building a muscle with a barbell. But a lot of us just we don't realize what's happening. So we just think the best outcome is to get it over quickly. Right. And even though that feels better, what really will happen is that emotion, if the nervous system's going to purge it out every time it can get the chance to, if it's stuck, kind of like constipation. And so it's just going to come out in. So why not just give them time to just let it out, let them stay in that space as long as they need to. It's not indulgence. We're not, when you say hold this space, it doesn't mean we're saying, yeah, that was right, your friend was so mean and you should be really mad. You're not doing that. You're just saying, I'm here for you. I see you. You're safe. And helping them go through it.
So then the main person then really is just working on calming your own nervous system down. So you're not reacting to their nervous system.
We need to increase our window of tolerance of what we can handle. So we're both strengthening our muscles. And I also just want to say, if anybody hears this, it's just like building muscles. You need to start with the 5 pound before you can do 100 pounds. So if you can only handle 5 minutes at first, or 2 minutes, or 30 seconds, do 30 seconds. And then if you need to step away, or if you need to try to use a calm down, technique, that's totally fine. And I'm not saying you shouldn't teach them how to breathe, but it goes back to why am I doing this? Is it because I'm so uncomfortable I can't handle their emotions? Or is it because
teach?
Do I want to just help them? I don't want to just teach them some good techniques. So step away, and it's okay if we can't let them feel the full thing today. Just keep coming back, and slowly we'll get to the place where we can handle 45 minutes of crying and not make it mean anything about them or about us.
That's why God gave me my little guy at the end, because he knew my tolerance was much higher for him. He's so sensitive. I can't imagine, because he's never been yelled at, right? So it'd be so interesting where this little guy is so sensitive, and he can't wear any clothes with a tag. I've never had a kid this extreme with sensitivities. And so it's been so good that I think one of my kids even joked, George is so glad, he did not come
so
first.
Lucky he came last. You're so ready.
That's why he's the bonus baby. I needed time to grow up.
I love it.
So Andee, tell us your website so people can come and check you out, or Instagram, or wherever people can go find more about you.
My website is connectmethodparenting.com. And Instagram is just my name, Andee with 2 E's, Martineau. And
awesome. Okay, so Andee has been so nice. We're actually going to do a giveaway for one of her books.
Yes.
And so go check out Instagram. I will tag both of us in the post, and it'll be on Instagram, and you can win this book. Honestly, I love this book. It's so highlighted. That's how I read books. all my little tabs and highlights. So this is a really great book to check out just as you're ready to up-level your parenting. And the reason, I'm sure I've talked about this with homeschooling before, the reason I have parenting as part of the homeschool is because it is such a strong foundation piece to then actually build a really solid homeschool, because the relationships are working. So you can figure out curriculum, figure out obstacles that pop up because you are not fighting with your kid. So it's really powerful. Okay, so go check out Andee. Make sure you hop on Instagram and go enter in for her book. Thanks so much for being here, Andee.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me.